Hello, freak bitches. What a week young Jim Norton has had. What a week.
Yes.
What a week Sirius Satellite Radio has had. What a week censorship has had. What a week Anthony Kumia has had. What a week all the people online that love to bitch and piss and moan and complain and get very excited when something fucked up goes down.
Yeah.
Well, something fucked up went down. If you're listening to this, if it's sometime in the future, because these recordings will be saved forever. Today's date is July 17th, 2014. Approximately a week ago, Anthony Kumia was taking photographs. Anthony of the Opie and Anthony show, which our pal Jim Norton is also part of, he was downtown in New York taking some photographs, and from there on, it's a bunch of, what he says, and what I'm sure the woman who beat the shit out of him would have a different story, but he was taking some photographs. One of the photographs was of this, what are those things called? When you, those things where you walk
Scaffolding?
through. Scaffolding. He was walking through the scaffolding. A woman was coming towards him. It looked like he was just taking a bunch of cool photos of New York. There's a bunch of them that he put up on his Instagram. Yeah. Anyway, this woman got upset that he was taking a photo of her, probably thought that he was perving, got mad at him, violence ensued, she hit him, and he went on Twitter and went on this rant about violence, about the black community and their propensity for violence, about this woman calling her an animal, which she did, and Sirius fired him, and which left a fucking huge hole in my entertainment world. The Opie and Anthony show is my all-time favorite radio show. I listen to it all the time, and now all of a sudden it is no more.
Yeah, it's it's a huge hole too. Like no one panicked like me because Opie and Anthony both have kind of fuck you money. Jim Norton doesn't. So selfishly thinking, I'm like, well, there goes everything because the show's done.
Well, you're always going to be great because you're a funny comic and you can always work and you never have to worry about that. But it is a crazy thing that all of a sudden like that for things that he said on the show 100 times.
I think what happened was he tweeted I talked to him multiple times since then. He was walking, and people don't believe that he was actually taking legitimate New York photos. That was one of the points of contention. People he was being creepy, but he really wasn't. Like Anthony has had this giant Hubble-like camera in the studio every day for probably 6 months now. He's getting into photography. It's what he's been doing. So that was not unusual at all to hear he was out and about taking photos. That's legit. And I guess this woman got angry. And I talked to him, and he said that she just said something like, this white boy's taking my picture, you white motherfucker. Whatever she said, she clocked him. And he kept defending himself. And as he's putting his arms up, she is going, don't touch me. Like, that thing that a woman might do to prevent you from hitting her? And you could see how frightening that would be because then people think you're beating on this woman.
Right. So
he's putting his hand up. And, I know Ant well enough to know he's not going to just punch a woman in the face. So she's doing that. And I think a few black guys came around, and they didn't do anything to Ant, but they were like, don't touch her. So, Ant, who is always armed and he's licensed to carry, didn't hit her, didn't pull out his pistol, and went home and I guess was really upset and went out on, like you said, a Twitter rampage. And I knew it was bad the next morning when I saw it because my ex-girlfriend called me, and she's like, what happened with Anthony? He got beat up by a woman? I'm like, I don't know. So I looked, and I saw the tweets. I'm like, oh. I actually texted him about one. I don't think I've ever done that before. There was one that I texted him about. I'm like, you all right, man? He's like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm like, okay. It was scary.
Wow. Yeah, the thing about Ant is he's developed this sort of style of communicating on the show where he goes on these long, hilarious, entertaining, profanity-filled rants. And there's one thing about hearing it, but there's another thing of seeing it in a text form. It's just not the same.
Things don't look good in print. Certain things, and I think what happened is in the middle of when you have a contextual conversation, it's like you have people. There's inflection. There's another guy next to you going, "Well, hey, what do you mean by that?" And then you're clarifying it, or it's a different energy when you're tweeting and you're that mad. I think any type of an assault, even if it's a woman hitting you and it's not life threatening, is still an hour later. You're like, what the fuck just happened? I think it just freaked him out.
And she hit him a couple times.
5 times or so. And she sent me pictures of his face, and he had like little. You could see that he had been struck. I mean, he wasn't making it up. And so he went on, and when I looked at the flow of things, like I know Anthony, and I know what he's saying. He was not calling all black people animals. He wasn't, because he's never said that. He's talking about a behavior of this woman. And I think that what happened was he was so mad. And when you're tweeting that aggressively and you're fucking dealing with this in your head, that sometimes things come out jumbled and muddied. And like, if you know Ant, you know what he's saying. People who don't know him are reading this going, what does he mean? He's saying that there's violence in black people and they're animal. Like, people are putting these pieces of a puzzle together and they're making a picture. And it was like, I know him well enough to know that in a conversation, if someone said, are you trying to say black people are animals? He would go, no, not at all. It's a behavioral-based thing. You know what I mean? Because he said that about white people, too. So, I mean, it was just one of those things where once it was in print, even in context, we lie as a country. Like, you know, like when Cancel Colbert came out, the activist knew the context that he was making those Asian jokes in and didn't give a fuck. She still wanted to sink him. She's like, no, I get it. He was trying to, you know, show the difference between the same thing between this and Native Americans and how ridiculous it is, but I don't care. So we've gotten to a point now where we don't even pretend to not understand the context anymore. We admit that we understand the context and we go after people anyway. So something like this is bound to sink you because it can be taken both ways unless you actually sit there and talk to the guy. And each tweet has to come out like a film. Each tweet has to be a beginning, middle, and end with no explanation needed around it in order to be survivable. If that makes sense.
Well, you know what? The big key to what you said, that it could sink you. Well, it only sinks you if you work for a company. And in my opinion, that's unnecessary. Yeah. In this day and age, it's unnecessary. And I think you guys, and I think Anthony for sure, would be far better off with a podcast. Anybody can get a podcast and put it on their phone now. Everybody's phone has a little jack that sticks into your car, and you play your phone through your car. Everybody has that now. I mean, it's not an uncommon thing. It's more common to have that jack than it is to have satellite radio. Most people have to get a satellite radio thing installed in their car. Most people already have that jack.
Right.
You know, it's so goddamn easy. And I bet you could get all the same sponsors. I bet you could get all the same sponsors, and you would have no middleman. And you don't look at the studio. It doesn't take much to put something together. You know, a little bit of time, a little bit of effort. You know, you got to know someone who's an engineer, know someone who knows how to put the stuff together and set up the microphones. But other than that, what's the difference between this and satellite radio? Right. I'll tell you what the difference is. Nobody can fucking fire you. You can go on some cunt rampage, that fucking animal cunt, and no one, you know, people might say, I'm not downloading your podcast anymore. Right. But at least you have the opportunity to communicate, to explain yourself. And if the people decide that they don't like your character based on one thing that you said or one rant that you went on, that is their decision. But it's not the decision of a company. Right. And when things get, you know, companies are squirrely, man. They have fucking shareholders and stocks, and they have responsibilities. And all you need is a few slacktivists that start web pages and, you know, fire Anthony and Anthony Kumia. We're going after those sponsors. We're going to let them know. We're boycotting. We're blah, blah. Yeah. Mostly just noise. Mostly nonsense. Mostly just soft targets. Yep. But all you need is a few of those, and a company will panic.
They do. What happens is, you know, it's a $1 billion company. So you get guys like, you know, Scott and Jim who runs it, who, you know, they're just, the 4th of July weekend was coming. And then all of a sudden they're getting phone calls from the New York Post and the Washington Post. And all the press obviously has a narrative, and they did a shit job. But the Washington Post, I thought, was the worst offender with the way they covered it. Because the woman wrote things that was just really, it was revolting to read.
What'd she write?
She was talking about Anthony saying that these guys came around, and she was saying, like, you know, oh, well, I guess if a bunch of African-American, or however she said, a bunch of gentlemen want to defend someone from defaming an African-American woman, it's okay. Like, that's what was happening. She wasn't acknowledging that Anthony was being hit. She acted like that these guys had read his Twitter feed and not liked it. It was just
like she read the Twitter feed in the future.
In the future, it was repulsive. While a woman who looks like the fucking fake deaf interpreter from Mandela's funeral is beating on Anthony. But
the fake deaf interpreter is it's a meme. That guy's a meme.
He's rules. But the company, these guys just get, all of a sudden they're home and they're getting phone calls in the office the day before vacation. So what are your comments? And they probably weren't even that familiar with it until they're getting calls from the paper, and they're like, well, what do we do with this? And then this is what the press does, and this is why you got to hate it. Because I think Sirius was going to try to write it out. That's my opinion, because they knew a holiday weekend was coming, And this is purely a guess because no one was saying anything. And then all of a sudden the press starts going, we have not had a comment from Sirius Satellite Radio, so we're assuming that they agree with Mr. Kumia's opinions. They do this sneaky shit to push you into defending yourself. So now the company with shareholders, like you said, has to go, well, how do we tell people that we don't agree? So it's not like the press is made them do it, but the press understands how to corner you into giving a statement, a definitive statement, because they know that you're not used to this. They know that these guys coming to work in management positions are not used to getting phone calls going, how do you feel about this statement and that statement? You know, it was really... It was a very frustrating thing when I saw what the press did with it. That to me is always who my biggest complaint is with. Always, it's with the press.
There's no nuance to the way they report on certain things like this, because there's nuance to this, especially if you look into it in character, if you in context rather. If you understand that guy and you look at him, look, there is a problem with violence in the black community. To pretend there's not a problem with violence in the black community is to pretend that there aren't insane amounts of murders going on in Chicago. To pretend that there's not issues with the amount of black people that are in jail, the percentage of the population. Now, are those economic problems? Are those problems related to upbringing? Are those yes, education, yes, absolutely. There's a lot of fucking disparity. There's a lot of problems with poverty. There's a lot of problems with the structure of our culture itself, and that you could attribute a lot of those problems to racism in the way that funds are allocated, the way that, you know, the attention that society puts on impoverished communities. Absolutely.
Institutionalized.
Yes. But to pretend that it's not a problem is ridiculous.
Right.
It's fucking ridiculous. So when he's taking a picture of some chick and she starts punching him, I think he's allowed to talk about the problem with violence with that community, with the community that this person is from that's beating him up. Did he do it the right way? No. Absolutely not. Did he do it in a way that could be misconstrued or construed or interpreted as racist? Absolutely did. Yeah, he did. He fucked up. He did it the wrong way. He probably shouldn't have done it on Twitter. He probably should have made a video.
Right.
Explaining, showing what happened to him, and explaining what goes on. Explaining this 140 fucking characters thing is a big part of the problem.
Dude, absolutely. That's exactly what it was. Because Anthony is so good at clarifying. Whenever you talk about race or a million other things, whether it's religion, or whatever, it's so hard to make your point without stepping in shit and then having to go off on 50 digressions. Like, no, that's not what I meant. No, that's not what I meant. Like, you know, that's the worst part of discussing stuff is that people jump in on the side. What are you saying? That all people do? All black people? No, I'm not. So in order to be able to get your point across, you have to walk a narrow... You almost have to close people's argument doors like a Get Smart episode as you're walking. This way your point gets through. Mm-hmm. And Anthony is a genius at doing that. A genius at it, because we've debated race so many times on the show, and him and Patrice would go back and forth, and Patrice loved Anthony because he said Anthony's an adorable racist. You know, Patrice was so funny with it. He never was upset by Anthony's opinions because Anthony would listen to him, and they would go back and forth. Half the times Patrice was right, and half the time Anthony was right. But on Twitter, I think like in that emotion, when you're saying X, Y, and Z, I don't think he did as good a job as he should have done of closing those doors behind him, almost like sealing off things that people can get to you on, because he was so upset because he had had a physical assault. And I know it sounds like I'm talking in circles and just defending my friend, but I've been with him for 10 years in this medium of totally uncensored. And I'm telling you, I know him well enough to know that he's got weird things where he'll talk about race and people misinterpret him. And I've talked to him privately. And the guy does not hate black people. And I know that that's just, his friends defending him. But I'm telling you that he does not, because I know him well. And then to hear people going, he hates black people, it's like...
He's just not afraid of being misconstrued or interpreted as racist. He's not afraid of it. By saying what he really believes is his opinion about certain aspects of a group. Whatever, race, a gender, whatever it is.
Sure.
He's not afraid of speaking his mind about things because he's got that fuck you money.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it. And he's got 150,000 guns.
Yes.
Those are two things. And, you know, a big part of it that drove me fucking crazy is people are not, they're not taking into account the reaction that someone has when they get assaulted.
Yes.
Because when you get hit by someone, some fucking stranger that you don't know hits you, especially when you've got a gun, you've got a fucking bullet launching gun. You've got a thing inside you that has explosions. You press a trigger, explosions propel bullets, and they end lives instantly. And Anthony's an expert with one, and he has it on him at all times. And he's getting hit. And he's like, what the fuck? And so he gets on like, fucking animal cunt, bitch, fuck you, this, that. You know, it's getting hit is a very disturbing thing. There's one thing to get hit in getting hit in a sparring session is infuriating with people. You know, I've seen people go fucking crazy because they get choked out in a jiu-jitsu session. Getting punched is way more traumatic. Getting punched by a stranger multiple times for taking a fucking photograph. I don't know what the exchange was between the two of them. I don't know, you know, if he was saying something that was infuriating. I wasn't there. You know, I'm not going to pretend I was there, but man, you got to take into account the reaction that people have when you hit them.
And it to me, and again, I hate to keep going back to the press, but they didn't focus on the fact that he handled himself properly in that. Because I don't know if I would have pulled the gun in that moment, but I'm a panicky Pete. And I would have just, when other guys were coming over, I would have at least brandished it. And he acted physically responsible. Like as a fucking guy with a pistol on him. Because people get shot all the time for dumb arguments and dumb things. He handled himself absolutely right and lost his cool once he got home. And the press didn't take that into account. They harped on the fact that he didn't get a police report. And I wished he had now in hindsight, because they're all going, Mr. Kumia did not get a police report. But here's the deal. Had he gotten a police report, they would have just ignored it. They wouldn't have said, well, at least he got a police report. They would have glanced over the fact and then said, yeah, well, anyone can get a police report. So they were just using that as a reason to kind of ignore the fact that he got hit. They're like, we didn't see a police report. All the press harped on the fact that he didn't get a police report. But Ant's response was, look, man, you know, I know enough cops to know that me getting hit by some lady in Times Square is not a fucking priority for NYPD, who's worried about terrorists.
Yeah, especially if he's fine. I think there's a real issue also with the press, with a lot of people in the press. I'll clarify that. What they're trying to do is they're trying to close those Get Smart doors as they write a piece as well. And as they're writing a piece, they are also trying to placate all the people that are going to be up in arms about their opinions, if they could possibly be supporting a racist, if they could possibly be taking his side, agreeing with him, seeing his point of view. They could be misinterpreted, or they could be interpreted as being racist as well. So they have to worry about that as well, especially if you're with a liberal rag. You know, if you have a very liberal newspaper that you work for and they have a clear agenda, which a lot of them do. The Washington Times does, right?
Washington Post, absolutely.
Washington Post does. There's a lot of them that have a liberal slant. And if you are reporting for them, you know, and it's something like this that's very controversial and something where there's a bunch of things that automatically have like a knee-jerk reaction to them. And this is one of them. Knee-jerk reaction to what's perceived as racist.
Yes, and another thing that they do that's even more enraging is what people who write for the press now have to do is that it's not just reporting what happened. It's how do I editorialize under the guise of being impartial.
Right.
And they do that a lot too. And that I don't like either. It's like that to me is the worst crime they commit, actually. It's the editorializing as they're going along, like it's legitimate, like NBC. And I'm not a Zimmerman fan either. Ant was a big supporter of Zimmerman. I thought Zimmerman should have went to jail for something. I didn't know what. Legally, I have no ground to stand on, but I kind of thought he was a cunt. But but not a guy who was out to commit a murder either. I thought there was a line in between. But whatever. Like NBC edited that tape.
Mm-hmm.
Like.
Can't do that.
There's no reason to do that unless you're pushing something.
Yeah.
But they're doing it under the guise of being impartial. And I'm sure they've done it plenty of times to vilify blacks. I'm not saying they haven't.
He lost that lawsuit, you know.
I know he did.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's absolutely nuts. I don't know why. The news has such a different level of what they can get away with and what they can do because they're seen as doing a public service.
In my opinion, though, I think they lost it because everybody was hating that guy, and they just didn't want him to win something on top of this. The fact that he still has his freedom, the kid lost his life.
Right.
I think he's a sucky fucking security guard. That's what I think.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to look at that guy and find fault in what he did, it's how did he handle the situation, and would a more confident, competent person have handled it the same way? Like, here's a perfect example. My friend Big John McCarthy, who's a cop. I guarantee you, the referee.
Oh,
UFC referee.
He's a cop, that guy?
Was a cop for a long time. But a great guy. But knows how to handle shit. If Big John McCarthy saw that kid walking in the neighborhood, he probably would have said, "How you doing, man? Everything cool?" you know, had a conversation with him, everything would have been fine. Like, even if the kid, like, got up in arms or got mouthy with him, he would have probably calmed him down, you know, without having to get into some physical altercation. Not only that, the kid wouldn't have been able to mount him and bash his fucking head off the ground because he's physically incompetent.
Right.
If you're going to fucking patrol a neighborhood, you can't do it just with a gun.
Right.
You can't have the last resort is your only resort. He can't physically defend himself. He's out of shape, he's soft and doughy, and he's not physically able to hold that guy off. But yet he's put himself in this position where he's like a security. He's the force of the truth of the law. You can't do that.
Right.
You're not qualified for that job. He's just not. So when that kid's on top of him, bouncing his fucking head off the curb, look, I don't see any way out for him other than using a weapon.
Right.
When that kid's beating the shit out of him, but he should have never gotten to that position. It should have never escalated to that. You telling me the only way two people can communicate like that is it comes into violence? No, it's how do you deal with it? How do you communicate? How did you address this person? What did you say when he talked back to you? What did you say? What were the exchange of words?
Right.
You know, and those things, there's a big difference between. There was a video that we played the other day. Do you even lift, bro? You ever see that guy? The Russian guy. Is he Russian?
There's even a worse one. Those
I
don't know. The Pakistani kids, though, in New York, where the Bronx, the police chief in Bronx, New York, was like, "Stop doing it. You're going to get killed." Like, these two kids that just go on YouTube and they go up to people in horrible neighborhoods and are like, "Hey, man, you got a problem?" While he's holding a calculator and he's just trying to be funny, but these guys are just bashing their heads in and stuff. And so the Bronx chief police or something like that said, "Look, stop it." But yeah, these videos are getting more popular.
My point is, if you watch those videos, the guy, he comes up to people that like look like they work out and goes, "Do you even lift, bro? Look how small you are." And some people handle it great. Some people go, you know, like, "Man, don't pull it up. We don't need to see it." Some people go, "Yeah, I mean, I don't even lift. You know, I guess I'm small." And then they laugh and they walk away. And some people like threaten them. Like it depends entirely on how two people interact with each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we don't know about the Anthony situation. That's what we don't know about the Zimmerman situation. It's not just about what went down. It's about how did it all play out? How could it have been avoided?
There's little subtleties in language. Like when Jonah Hill was apologizing recently, and he's obviously not a homophobe. He just got mad and said, "Suck my dick, faggot." It was a stupid thing in a moment. And he's on the Tonight Show. And again, he's just apologizing. I don't think he never had to deal with something like this. And he said something. He goes, "Man, the intent doesn't matter. It's the words. The words are..." And it was like, again, I know you're on the spot in that moment, and I'm not going to crucify the guy, but I wish I was there so I could just appear on the seat next to him, like in that Woody Allen scene when the guy walks out to correct the guy online and go, "No, the intent is everything." Because if the words matter, the next time somebody said the fucking Giants killed the Jets, well, we better call the police. Oh, that's right. It's the intent. We understand every single interaction or phrase has an intent behind it, which doesn't always come through in the written word. It's just it's an inflection.
And that's something that you and I had a conversation about with the Tracy Morgan situation, with people pretending that what he was saying when he was on stage, you know, that he was going to stab his son if his son was gay. Like, his whole act is filled with him saying ridiculous shit.
Yeah.
This is not a statement. It's not an affidavit he's making in court. You're taking it out of context because it's a soft target if you do that.
Yes. I'm going to stab my son because he's gay as a statement of fact, or at the end of a political rally, is a pretty awful thing to say. But if you've opened up with, "I'm going to get you pregnant and I'm going to mold shit and make a hat out of it," it's kind of hard to take any one statement and go, "Well, that's the serious one." But that's that purposely ignoring context, or even when you can't ignore it, saying, "Yeah, we understand the context and we don't fucking care."
It's just soft targets. People find soft targets, and those targets, look, if they're all ganging up on Anthony, too. That's the other thing. I'm not saying boo-hoo Anthony, but let's pay attention to what's really going on. If you're writing an article out of the blue for no reason about Jim Norton, you're the only guy. I think Jim Norton is a despicable person, and you write this article. You have the option to respond to that. And you can go, "Well, who are you, Mr. Reporter Dickwad? Let's take a look at you," and then other people can take a look at him too. Right. But when everybody's piling on, it's a free-for-all. It's a free ride.
And then you're there flailing wildly. Although Louis C.K. actually raised a really good point about that when something was happening. He goes, you have to remember too, everybody's not Googling you. Like, everyone is not Googling Joe Rogan or Jim Norton or Anthony Kumia. Like, so you're seeing every result about yourself, and it appears overwhelming. But the reality is, like, people may be reading Newsday or The Post or The Gawker or Vice or, whatever they're reading, but they're not reading every single article on Anthony Kumia or on Jim Norton. So that's where the overwhelming thing is sometimes misleading because people are all reading little snippets of it. Mm-hmm. But when the company's getting calls from, again, 5 or 6 different outlets, to them it feels overwhelming and like, what the fuck do we do with this? Because this wasn't on the air. So I think that's what, and again, they haven't discussed this with me. I'm purely speculating because to them, if it was on the air, I'm guessing they would have said, well, that's what he does on the air. But they're not looking at it like, well, he was reacting to being hit. I think they just were like, oh, okay, we got to fire him. Like, I think that's why they kind of just reacted very quickly.
I think they fucked themselves. I really do. They fucked themselves because they were supposed to be the place where it was free speech. This is the wild place, but we're the virus. It was the virus channel, remember? Now it's Sirius XM Talk. That's it?
Yeah,
it's Sirius XM Talk?
We have to rename it, but we don't know what. Well, they have to. They're not asking for my input. I don't want my name on the show. Like I want to be on the show, but I don't want it to be Opie and Jimmy. I don't want people to feel like I'm jumping into Anthony's seat because I'm not.
Right.
If they call it Opie Show, I'm much more happy with that because that's what it was before he met Anthony Kumia.
How about call it We Miss Anthony?
Yeah, that would be kind of, or Tony. We'll call it Tony so they don't know who we're talking about. We'll just say, where's Tony?
We'll be sneaky.
Yeah. But it is a horrible, and it's like people get mad at me and Opie, and it's like, we don't, and I tried to say, like, we didn't.
Mad at you for what?
Because they people think that we're like a bunch of teenagers hanging out and they're like, you guys should walk in support. And it's like, first of all, you dumb motherfuckers that say that. Anthony, I've talked to, he wouldn't walk. And he told me, dude, you got to make your money. Like, and it's all, and B, I'm under contract. I can't just walk. I have 3 more months on the contract. And Opie tried to clear this up on the air. Like, if we just walk out, if they don't fire us and we just walk and say a bunch more subs leave because they realize, like, wow, the show really is gone. Then all of a sudden, Sirius wants to take action on us for breach. It's a whole fucking legal. People just don't get that part of it. And they think that we're fucking Anthony. You know who doesn't think we're fucking Anthony? Anthony. He knows we're not fucking.
Only an idiot thinks you're fucking Anthony, but there's always going to be idiots with opinions out there.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. When people say, like, dude, I love you and Opie, but I got to cancel because I'm staying with Anthony, I don't get mad at those people. Or if people are like, I'm going to keep Sirius and I'm also going to listen to Ant, I don't bog. I'm fine with that, too, because I get the emotion. Like, whatever they got to do to support Ant is cool with me. I want them to stay because in my ideal world, they listen to me and Opie, and then they fucking listen to Anthony. There's no competition. I'm not gonna. We're not like, hey, don't mention Anthony. You know, when his fucking show comes out, I'm gonna tweet it because I want him to succeed because he's one of my closest friends.
It's gonna succeed. It's going to. If just he's an entertaining guy. He's an interesting guy, and the platform of the internet is so free and easy. And he's already got a full professional setup at his house.
Yeah.
People don't know, if you've never seen, one of the main reasons I started this podcast is because of Live from the Compound. Because he set up a fucking green screen in his house, a professional studio, and he was playing images behind him of, like, the city, of, like, he had a green screen. I mean, a beautiful green screen. Like, professional broadcast quality cameras, like, the whole deal. I was like, that's amazing. And that slowly but surely led to what you're seeing right here. Like him doing that while he was already on Sirius. And Sirius tried to stop him from doing that. They gave him a hard time about that.
Yeah, I mean, that was it. I think that was a contractual issue too, where they're like, "Look, this is the medium you're on." But eventually, they kind of like let him do it, and they're like,
What do you think is going to go down with September when your contract is up?
October 4th, I don't know. I mean, like, I love the gig. I love performing.
But do you love the gig the same with Anthony not being
there?
No,
of course not. No. I mean the idea of performing either alone or with other people.
Right.
I want this thing to work because I want my own thing. Like, I've done so many things.
This thing meaning the Vice thing.
Yes, Jim Norton show.
Yes.
I want to have my own thing too because you feel like a more complete performer when you're not always with Opie and Anthony or Colin Quinn or Louis C.K. or Amy Schumer's put me on her show. Like, I don't always want to be on somebody else's thing.
Right.
So I love the idea of performing on the radio. I love doing it with Opie. I love doing it with Opie and Anthony more because, and I would say the same thing if Opie left. Like, I honestly do love being a part of that radio show. Mm-hmm. Being without Anthony is difficult, and Opie would say the same thing. It's just, like, it's hard to realize how much space a person fills in your life until they're not there. Like, I mean, we all know Anthony's a comic genius. That's easy to say, but it's like the little moments, like when there's that chair. I mean, I'm close. I sit closer to Anthony than I do to you.
Right.
Every day, 5 days a week for 10 years, and now he's just gone. And it's really hard to get used to that empty seat, whether he's saying something funny or whether he's just doing a stupid E-Rock joke or a little aside or just it's like this whole fucking vacuum of this great, powerful brain that used to be, a foot away from me.
Yeah, or just talking about things. He's a fascinating guy. He's got a lot of information in his head.
He can talk about anything for any length of time.
Yeah.
Anything he can be. And we've said that, like, and I've said this before, but Patrice said that Anthony can access funny faster than anybody he'd ever known. Like, he just had the ability to access being funny immediately on any subject. Like, if you're talking, like, he was a tin knocker. He would put in air conditioning vents. And he can walk you through that in a fascinating way and be funny about it and be captivating with it. I just die telling a story. I lose people and it's a joke I've done, but I meant the sincerity of it, that if I was on 9/11, if I made it out of the first tower, I would lose people halfway through the story. Like, I just have no ability to go from the beginning to the middle to the end and keep people locked in.
Did you guys have a meeting with Sirius after this was
No.
all over? I know Opie
talked to Scott. I talked to Scott on the phone, and he goes, look, we're going to try to move forward with you and Opie and see how it happens. He goes, work through it organically on the air. They didn't tell us how to do it. They didn't say, don't badmouth the company, don't. He said, work through it organically on the air, and we'll see what happens. So, I mean,
we'll see what happens. Have they completely closed the idea of Anthony ever coming back?
I don't think so. And they've given me no indication, so I'm careful how I say that, because I don't want the fans getting like I'm putting false hope out there. But I'm just being truthful. It doesn't feel final to me. And maybe that's my own denial or my own lack of willingness to admit that this thing could be over. Like, it was really sad, man. Last I saw Anthony, I went to his fucking 4th of July party, and I was very depressed driving home. Like, I know I'm going to be okay financially, and I know, like, hey, this other show could take off. Hey, you got stand-up. Hey, you got... But just the idea that this thing you love to do, like, all right, this chapter is closed. Like, it just fucking depresses me.
It depresses me to listen to it. I couldn't imagine if it was me every day, day in, day out, being a part of it. Every time I did it, I loved it. I mean, I had a great time doing your show. It's my favorite radio show of all time, without a doubt.
It's a real conversation. You have real moments. And the laughs. Somebody played for me recently, or they sent me a link to Jim Norton's laugh compilation. There's just times where people have made me laugh on the show. And I listened to part 1 and 2, because the point is not me laughing. It's the things. And most of those laughs have come from Anthony, more than any guest or anybody. And some of the things he did a thing recently, or years ago, that I heard 2 days ago, where we were talking about people who have shot themselves in the head and survived. And Anthony did the voice of the guy who survived, and he just went into, it was an immediate, he became the guy who had shot himself in the fucking head and survived. And he was talking about how he just has a more positive outlook. And I'm howling listening to it in the clip. And I'm listening to it 2 days ago. And I'm laughing all over again. I'm like, I forgot that bit ever existed. But God, this cocksucker made me fucking laugh. And I'm not talking about him like he's dead. But I mean, that's how valuable a thing he is. Like, I can't listen to radio bits,
I think they made a big mistake. I think they made a big mistake for a couple reasons. One, I think they made a big mistake because I think it's going to open the door more to the internet. Because people are going to look at that as the last remaining true free speech option.
Yep.
Because that's what it is. Look, you could say you don't like this podcast. You can decide that I'm offensive. You can do whatever, but you can't stop it. I mean, even the host might say, we don't want to host you anymore. I'll find another host. The sponsors might say, we don't want to be your sponsor anymore. Well, guess what? I'll do it with no sponsors.
Sure.
We did it with no sponsors for years. This is the only real option where you're your own producer, your own director, you're the whole thing. You're the performer. You're the whole thing. That's where it's at. Because just like a stand-up is entirely responsible for your act that you put on stage, if you had some producer hovering over your fucking shoulder every time you wrote a bit, every time you were thinking about putting together a set list, every time you were going up and doing a show,
right,
they would review it afterwards, that would be gross. That would take all the fun out of being a comic.
Yeah, it would be awful. I mean, that's why I'm a bad collaborator, because you're so used to having absolute and ultimate and control of things.
Well, you're a perfect example. Think about you and you as a successful performer and personality. Who the fuck would have ever thought you could have made a mainstream career out of talking about your love of trannies, talking about shit and piss and shitting in each other's mouths and peeing on people, monster rain. Just look at the honest things that you've tackled. And because you're honest, because you're funny, if you had to vet that through somebody else, if you had to have that filter through some sort of a mainstream producer, it would have never happened. It would never work.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's why you're right. The internet is the last place where, at least, I mean, for now, who the fuck knows what happens with that?
But all that stuff you did on Sirius. Sirius had a different approach when they first came out. They've slowly but surely clamped down. From that Condoleezza Rice incident, that's where it was like, ooh, you could get in trouble for something that someone says on a radio show that isn't even like a guest.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, isn't even one of the hosts.
Right.
Your show could get canceled. A homeless guy.
Yeah. And they were going to fire us for that. Eric Logan saved it. That was XM. It wasn't serious. It was, and this is what happened. The NAB, the National Association of Broadcasters, somebody on that side, I think, was what was pushing it. Because the story went on Drudge and Breitbart. Will this hurt the merger? And again, the guys who ran this is when they're about to merge.
Yeah.
Will this injure the merger? And man, there was $1 billion at stake. And it wasn't going to hurt the merger, but they fucking panicked. And these are all different people that are in charge now. But they're like, and they don't know how to deal with stuff. So they get the phone call. The guy, Nate, I think, was running XM at the time, or Hugh Pinero. What do you think of this thing? They said, a homeless guy said he wants to rape Condoleezza Rice. And what? He's worried about $1 billion merger. And I'm not defending them suspending us, but I try to put myself in their, like, and this is a guy, I mentioned Louis because he's a good non-emotional reactor to things. And he'll look at things and go, well, they're just trying to do this. And like Louis will give you a very logical reason as to why something's happening. And it's like, yeah, I wish I would have seen that. I get too angry and emotional and you're like, fuck them, they're saying. And then I'll go like, okay, that's $1 billion company. They're not used to this. And they hear this guy wants the fucking first lady raped, Bush or George Bush, and they're laughing about it. Merger might be threatened. Fuck him, get rid of him. He just panics.
Isn't it fascinating, though, that you're talking about $1 billion company? Okay, Sirius XM, $1 billion company. Okay, what exactly are they selling? Well, what they're selling is content. Who delivers that content? Guys like Opie and Anthony. Guys like Jim Norton. They're selling your ability to be entertaining. Other than that, it's just music. How do you have $1 billion company that's just selling music?
Well,
you don't.
That's what my argument would be too. Look, the talk thing is the last thing you guys have, and this is for even terrestrial radio too. The last thing you have is original talk content, and their point back would be, well, that's a great thing that we have, but we also have whether it's a celebrity, people doing shit, or we have sports that you can't get across. Let's say we have the NBA, we have a Major League Baseball. I'm just saying that's what they would say.
Yeah, but nobody's paying for that. Let's be honest. They're paying for Stern. They're paying for Opie and Anthony.
I hope so, man.
Especially since Spotify and like those like Pandora. Because it used to be I like Sirius Radio because they had like the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, whatever, and all the different radio stations. Nowadays, you just put Spotify, put anything you want in as a, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I get almost all my shit from iTunes. I don't ever listen to music in my car anymore unless it's coming off of my phone. It's just, I don't need to. You don't need to anymore. You don't need them anymore. Yeah. And what the last thing that's exciting is things like Stern and things like Opie and Anthony, where you can have a guy who is just freewheeling, saying whatever he wants, doesn't have to worry about language restrictions, doesn't have to worry about anything. And the fact that he can get fired for saying the same things that he's always said on his show, just saying them in a text message, that they're so ignorant that they can't recognize that this is, you're taking it out of context, you're taking it from a guy who's just recently been assaulted, you're taking it from a guy who probably had a couple of drinks in him when he said it, and he shouldn't have done it. He fucked up. He definitely shouldn't have gone on that Twitter rampage. He should have said it on a video.
And you know what?
Podcast or on the show.
Yeah,
on the show.
On the show.
Yeah, on the show would have been perfect. It would have been a great episode.
Yeah. Oh, that would have been fun. And Keith Robinson pointed out, he's like, the teasing we could have given him. Oh, the teasing.
Oh, it would have been beautiful.
But I don't know if that's something that will ever change. Like, they may at one point go, we do kind of understand that maybe he's a valuable asset to the again, I don't know why I don't get that feeling, because they haven't said to me we'll bring him back. They really haven't, and I never want to give fans. I'm not trying to keep fans from canceling. It literally is just a feeling, a gut feeling. He didn't drop N-bombs. He didn't go on this, and I've talked to him enough to know what his intent was. And maybe that's just this naive dummy in me, but I keep thinking, man, he should come back. He can come back. Just give it some time. And I just keep hoping for that.
I think he can come back. I think if they gave it some time, he definitely can come back. In the context of what he said, it wasn't that bad. I wouldn't have been happy if it was my company and I had shareholders and all that jazz. But obviously I would never be that guy anyway. I would never be a fucking head of a big company. I'm just not built for it. But you got to recognize the entertainment quality. The entertainment aspect of that guy, the entertainment possibilities of keeping the show together. It's because without that, all you have is Stern. Obviously you guys are still together and it'll still be a great show, but it's not the same show. It's not. And you leave open the door for Anthony starting his own thing, some wildly successful thing on the internet, which also, look, if someone comes along and they put together some sort of an advertising budget and they say, hey, listen, we would like to do we'd like to host the Opie and Anthony podcast on the internet. We'll take X percentage of the advertisers. We've already got it lined up. We have a big launch. We're going to do it around Thanksgiving. Someone's going to fuck a turkey live on the air. Whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You start doing, you come up with some idea to do something completely free and wild on the internet. A big advertising push, buy billboards, Times Square, fuck Sirius. We're doing it on the internet. ONA is back and it's free. Download it online. You don't need to pay for a subscription anymore. Anybody can get it on your phone. I mean, you can do it the way we do it. We're available on we're available online as an MP3. We're available from iTunes. We're available on Stitcher, on YouTube, on Ustream, on Vimeo. If you just did something like that, it would be gigantic.
Yeah, maybe you're right, man. We have thought about it, and again, we're up in October 4th. We don't know, and we honestly don't know what we do from here. Like, again, Opie and I are doing the show, bringing guests in and just performing, and it's like we both feel the fucking loss of it.
Go through Vice. Do it all through Vice. There would be a wonderful promotion vehicle for you guys to do Opie and Anthony live through Vice. They'll set you up with a studio, do it all online, do the show as a video online, and do the show, have it available as a podcast, free downloads. They provide you with advertisers. It wouldn't be hard to do. Shane could hook that up in 5 seconds. They could make one phone call, and the wheels would be in motion.
I would love to do that.
And that's a guy that like shit could get really crazy, and everyone's gonna be fine.